I wanted to ask, so this is modeled a lot like Tailwind UI. Tailwind is like, or Tailwind UI, I should say, is a phenomenally successful project, financially phenomenally successful. And as you alluded to, building UI libraries, actually, it's a ton of work. There is really a ton of work getting the details right. And especially if you're trying to do something like mimic a platform that already exists. And so you have a monetization layer to this. And I'm curious is like how that experience has developed, how it started. Was it really just, hey, Tailwind UI is like making a successful model off this. We should mirror their model and see if we can also drive that same success. Was it like, what was the motivation? And yeah, how's it going?
Yeah, the pricing model is actually the part that I probably think about the most now because I think there's a lot of just on a more abstract to preface my answer on a more abstract level. As an engineer, you go in thinking the whole thing is just build it and you're just fulfilling a task list. And then once you put it out there, it'll just be, oh, this is what I was looking for. But in fact, there is an entirely different layer to it, which is the human engineering aspect, right? How do people expect to interface with something? And they're not always going to tell you what that is. So you have to have these sort of objective conversations, introduce objective lines of questioning about how they currently do stuff in order to get at the answer in a roundabout way. And so for a while, as far as then to actually hone in on the pricing question, we mirrored the pricing options predominantly for Tailwind UI, and we even visually wanted to make it feel similar to those who are coming from the web. But we can't ignore these sort of differences between mobile and web. One of them being, as an example, for web, there's already a million of these component kits, right? Including Shadsia and UI. And while it isn't a component kit traditionally, the maturity of that market is much further along. And so what people can get access to, it's almost like a race to the bottom. You know what I mean? And so Shadsia and UI's only out really then is to be acquired or sell, so to speak, and begin to make things like V0, right? Mobile just isn't there yet. There's not as many. And so you always have to be reminded like, okay, if someone's going to have a problem with paying, what is it, like $300 in the US for a library like this, what that probably means is that they haven't really tried to do it themselves yet. And you have to have the patience to let that person go on their journey and not try to accelerate that journey for them. Because for most of the people, and especially the people who purchase the product, when they join the community and we're chatting with them, they're over the moon. If anything, they think the product's like cheap relative to what it is, especially on the team pricing plan. And so you're stuck between people who are comparing you to things on the web and people who, pricing wise, that is, and people who have clearly been struggling with this for quite some time, especially the native feel aspect, and see this as a very cheap way to achieve that. Not compromising on the quality, of course, but relative to how much time they otherwise would have spent on it. So the question then becomes like, how can you give people more of a hint of what this experience is like? How can you give them a taste of the experience while not giving away too much? And that's hard. Pricing for developer tooling is inherently difficult because your band of audience is very narrow. Maintaining then your library is further challenging. I don't know. When I try to think about parallels for this kind of thing, I can't help but just go back to the video game industry and how games used to be, where they had to get things out. There's no over the air update on a PlayStation disc on Spyro the Dragon, right? Whatever they were able to get into Spyro 1 is what they're going to get in. And that's going to be the experience. And that's what people are going to remember years down the line. Or like Halo and Halo 2. Those were not perfect, but iconic, memorable experiences. And I want to try to hang on to that as much as I can. Like I admire that one-time purchase. I've introduced recurring subscriptions. I still don't know how I feel about that. I'm curious how you guys think about this. Like I'm very curious to hear what your perception is of all these different things, but it's something that I think about a lot.
It is a conversation we tend to have very frequently in the podcast is you're doing a thing, most of your work is maybe open source. How do you make it sustainable? What do you do? So Adam Latham and team have made Tailwind a phenomenal success by offering layers of stuff. It's a very similar model. It's like basically give away Tailwind for free and then build a lot of like high quality resources on top of that. You'll get two sides of this. You'll get people coming from, they're used to pulling down an open source library and they get really frustrated that they can't use your thing that they probably wouldn't really stick to anyway because they're not really serious about building a product. And then you get the people who like, yeah, if I tried to build this myself, it's going to be like tens of thousands of dollars. And I'm really not interested in doing that. Like you're saying, 3 months, even if it was only 3 months, is 3 months of an engineer's time is a pretty expensive endeavor. So I'm all for more of these things existing. And I also think that one of the big things is, especially when you're engaging with an audience, one of the big challenges with open source is you get people who just drive by, they give you a little feedback, or they just like gripe at your thing. And getting high quality engaged feedback is really hard. And you can see the same thing in consulting if you charge really low prices. Like you do consulting with customers who are cheap, your feedback is going to be pretty poor. They're like going to request everything. And the kind of feedback we've heard again and again is like charge what you're worth, make it like effective to support your business. And the interesting knock-on effect is you end up getting like better quality. All that to say is I think that this is like completely a valid thing and more people should do it because it's like, as someone who's like potentially thinking about using a library like this to build a product, if I'm coming to it and it's got a paid feature, that I'm more sure that it's going to be around next year and still be getting updates versus an open source library that's maintained by one person who's like really burned out.
Yeah, I have a couple of points that I really firmly believe, and I have that sort of strong opinions loosely held kind of thing. But one thing I think regarding open source you mentioned, I do not believe open source has a financial like I've heard a lot of discussions about this is like open source is never going to make money for you. It's if it hasn't worked for everyone else, you're not special. It's just not. So don't try to make money off of open source. That being said, there is a sort of mixed model that you can do where you can leverage open source to serve as a sort of distribution channel and demonstrate value. And what's funny too is that you'll see folks as high up as like the guy who made Homebrew complaining about this same exact thing is I didn't even get a cheeseburger or something for the work that I did. And I'm like, you did it open source. You chose to do that. Equally, on the other side of that, people who use open source libraries have a tremendous level of entitlement. And I definitely see this with NativeWind is they'll post the issues and they'll just be like, how could this not work? This isn't working. This isn't super simple. And I just say it like it is. Look, post a repro or I don't care. And I was baffled too because Mark again is very gentle giant kind of thing. Like he's one of the nicest people I have ever met in person. He has that kind of Aussie, like rough around the edges kind of thing, but he's such a kind person. But when I see him in the GitHub comments, the man is like on fire. Like he is a savage on there. He is very harsh. And I was like, is this what like, it was like a Smeagol Golem type of energy kind of thing. I was like, is this what open source does to people? And I feel that it's the ability to maintain a sense of humanity after maintaining a library as large as NativeWind or more is very admirable. If you meet anyone who's like still kind and like humane, like while doing that, give that person a hug. Like thank that person because that's amazing. So that's certainly one thing. As far as then actual products, if people aren't buying your thing and you have a large enough distribution channel, move on. They don't want it. They don't want the thing. And you need to be okay with that. That's really hard for me still. I have deep passion projects that I really admire that I think are very promising. And I have a distribution channel to plug them through. And then people just don't respond. And I'm like, that's just it. And you need to have that humility. You need to check that ego at the door. That's something you can't even explain to a person. I'm sure you guys run into people all the time who are like, oh, we just have to do this like another month or two of work or something, and then we'll launch, and then this will. No, it won't. Because if it hasn't popped off in the last 6 to 12 months, it's absolutely not going to pop off in the next month or two. But marketing is hard. And that's really what I'm faced with right now is as an engineer, how do you marketing is not as, what do you call it, trackable or quantifiable as engineering time is. And I can definitely see how someone coming from that background might get very frustrated with that dynamic.
Yeah, and as engineers, we love fast feedback loops. Marketing is the opposite. It's like you throw some stuff against the wall, some stuff might stick. It probably wasn't because of you, and you have to somehow use that information and go forward and like market a product. I've failed at it many a time.
I still like today we had that video launch with Simon, and Simon Grimm is who I'm talking about. He does great videos on YouTube. He made this video and I woke up today and I got we got a handful of orders for NativeWind UI, and I'm still just so thankful for every single order that comes through. Like that Stripe notification coming through, it has not gone away. The novelty and how much I appreciate and get excited about each thing like that. I'm not taking any of it for granted just yet. Hopefully. Like, I'm hopeful to be anywhere near the success level of NativeWind UI, or sorry, Tailwind UI. That would be incredible. But I think we got a long way to go before then. And there's maybe some aspect of the formula that we could improve upon. I'm learning just like everybody else is. I'm curious to see what happens between Expo Router and NativeWind, what they offer there. And ultimately, I want the experience of building React Native applications to be not easy, but straightforward. I'm fine with painful if it means that this framework is allowing me to do the wrong thing, but it's making it painful to do it. And it'll make it like easy to do the right thing.